Great. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is Rachel O'Donnell, and I'm the Massachusetts Safe Routes to School Program Director. The Massachusetts Safe Routes to School program is proud to offer today's webinar on the exciting topic of school streets. We're excited to spend the next hour talking about what school streets are, why communities are using them, and what it looks like to move from an idea to implementation. Our goal today is to give you both inspiration and practical takeaways so you leave with examples, lessons learned, and resources you can use in your own community. Before we begin, let's review a few housekeeping items. This is a Zoom meeting, not a webinar, so please keep yourself muted until the Q&A portion. To see text captions on the screen, please enable live transcript using your Zoom controls. If you are able, please rename yourself to add what organization, municipality, or school you are representing today. This meeting will be recorded and made available on the Safe Routes to School website shortly. Lastly, please put all questions in the chat and we will address them during the Q&A portion. Leon, our operations manager, is available to help with any tech questions. I'm also joined today by Julia Sanders with Alta Planning and Design. She works closely with Safe Routes to School programs across the country on a variety of initiatives like pedestrian and bike safety, school access, program development, and community-centered street design. We will also have a few guest speakers who we will introduce later on. Let's review the agenda for today's webinar. First, Julie will cover all things school streets. Then we'll have those few guest speakers talk about their experiences implementing them, and we will wrap up reviewing our Massachusetts Safe Routes to School guide on school streets. We will have plenty of time at the end to answer your questions. And Leon, could you actually put a copy of the webinar slides in the chat? Thank you so much. And without further ado, I will pass it along to Julia.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm so glad to be able to share on this exciting topic today. So a school street is a people-first street or a block outside of a school where motor vehicle access is limited. There are a variety of models, but most school streets operate during arrival and dismissal times, when traffic conflicts, impacts to air quality, and student safety concerns are highest. While these streets are closed to most traffic, emergency vehicles, school transportation, paratransit, and local access are always accommodated. Rather than using the school front as the place to drop off students traveling by car, families drop students either at a different side of the school or at various locations around the neighborhood, dispersing the cars and the pollution so that it isn't concentrated at the school entrance. Some schools use the rule that students should be dropped off at the same number of blocks from the school as their grade, with kindergartners getting the priority location closest to the building. The whole purpose is to create a safer, calmer, and more welcoming environment at the front of the building so that students can walk, bike, and roll more comfortably, and families have a place to gather at the beginning and the end of the school day. Communities use school streets for a few very practical reasons. They reduce traffic conflicts at school entrances and improve safety for students and caregivers. They also reduce vehicle idling, and they create visible, positive change that families can experience right away. Over time, school streets can help build trust and strengthen connections between schools, families, and neighborhoods. Evidence from the UK, Canada, and a growing number of US pilots shows that these changes happen quickly, often within days of implementation. So this is a movement that can make a big impact fast without requiring a large budget or making major infrastructure changes. One benefit of school streets is they are hard not to notice. So they're also a great way to build program recognition and get conversations started within the community around active transportation. Because you're really meeting the school community right where they're at, improving their daily lives in a noticeable and impactful way. As I mentioned, air quality is a strong driver for school streets. The morning drop-off period concentrates vehicle activity at exactly the time students are arriving and most exposed. A 2025 study in the Journal of Transport and Health found that school streets reduced personal vehicle use by 35% and vehicle emissions by 31%, with an impressive 93% reduction in related ambient air pollution during drop-off window. What's notable about that is that it isn't just traffic displacement, it reflects a measurable shift in travel behavior with clear public health implications. Most school streets share a few common features. They're typically time limited, focused around arrival and dismissal, and designed to maintain access for emergencies and essential services. Many begin as pilots using cones, barricades, signage, or paint, allowing communities to test and refine operations before making any long-term decisions. Once people experience the immediate benefits, better connection, improved safety, a calmer school climate, and in some cases, even improved attendance, many schools choose to make their school streets permanent. Being able to take this phased approach while getting feedback and making adjustments is part of what makes school streets such an accessible project for a lot of communities to pilot. The upfront investment is small, and it has the potential to turn into big, long-term change. How school streets are framed to the community really matters because it sets clear expectations from the start. The focus should be on improving safety and the experience at the school front, not on banning cars across an entire neighborhood. That being said, changes to morning traffic flow around schools always requires a period of refinement and cultural adjustment. Problems will come up, but because a period of refinement is built into the plan, solutions can be implemented to address any negative impacts. Tensions and discomfort around these changes often arise within the neighborhood, but encouraging feedback from those impacted and responding promptly can do a lot to make a working system where everyone feels respected and heard. So making sure that those communication channels are set up from the get-go is very important. A short framing statement that many programs use is school streets are timed, low-cost street closures outside schools that turn chaotic drop-off zones into safe, people-first spaces. And there isn't just one way to do a school street. Across the US and internationally, we tend to see four main models, ranging from short daily closures to permanent pedestrian priority streets. Many successful programs use a phased approach to the closure timing as well, which allows communities to see the impact of a school street in action before committing to longer closures. It can be helpful to consider all of these different options because there's no one-size-fits-all approach here. What works for one community might lead to pure chaos for another. So understanding the different voices, needs, and experiences of the actual people using the street is a step in the process that shouldn't be overlooked or minimized. Community engagement is critical to getting any successful school street off the ground and should be used to decide which model fits the school and the neighborhood best. The most common model in the US is a timed closure. The streets close for about 30 to 60 minutes during arrival and dismissal, then reopen. This model is predictable, relatively easy to manage, and often the best place to start for most communities. Most neighbors living next to the school will already be used to sort of having to avoid that area during these times, so it can be easier to get buy-in with the timed closure. Initiating any change to traffic flow can feel really intimidating, but the main work is simply engaging with the community throughout the process, sharing clear and consistent communications about the timing, and creating effective signage. It does not have to become an all-encompassing project to make a big difference for students, families, and the neighborhood as a whole. Some communities choose to expand beyond that. All-day school streets keep the street closed during all school hours, and they may support outdoor learning, recess, or flexible programming. Permanent school streets are full-time pedestrian priority blocks with physical infrastructure like bollards, diverters, signage, and often student-designed art. These tend to grow out of successful pilots with strong community support. Expanded models are especially appealing for communities where outdoor space is hard to come by, since they provide outdoor opportunities for movement, learning, and play. One of the most interesting evolutions we're seeing come out of the use of these expanded models is that school streets are also being utilized as community spaces. In places like New York City, these streets host art tables, plant sales, fundraising initiatives, reading corners, science activities, food carts, health services, and cultural programming. The street starts to feel less like a traffic facility and more like an extension of the school and the neighborhood. Families have the space to interact at drop off and pickup, and they also have easy access to important services and enrichment activities. And this matters because it builds long-term support, trust, and recognition within the community. When people experience a street as a place to gather and connect, they begin to see it as a shared civic asset, not just a closure to tolerate or a space for vehicles to drive. As the program grows, cars are replaced with joy, and suddenly those neighbors who begrudgingly agreed to the pilot become your biggest supporters. So I want to zoom out for just a moment and look internationally because some of the most exciting school streets work is happening outside of the US. These examples can kind of help expand our sense of what might be possible in the future as this movement continues to take hold here. So the photos on this slide show some of that international work in action. You'll see school streets all over the globe in places like London, Milan, Brussels, Vienna, Toronto, and Melbourne. They resonate globally across cultures and climates because they're simple, low cost, and human-centered. So I want to take just a moment to highlight two particularly exciting, well-funded international examples, one in Paris and one in Barcelona. In Paris, school streets often begin with temporary installations, and after the community has had a chance to troubleshoot any traffic issues, they transition to permanent car-free spaces with trees, seating, and play features. So we're going to watch just the first minute of this video, which is made by Street Films, to give you a very brief snapshot of what might be possible. And we're sharing a link to this video in the chat as well.
Transition under Mayor Hidalgo's leadership from that time to now is incredible in terms of what's happening on the streets.
The school streets was in the program of the mayor when she was candidate, so the people voted for that. We aim to have 300 streets by the end of the mandate, which is in 2026. And we already have 180 streets that were transformed like this street.
This is a school street, like about 180 school streets that have been redesigned and completely pedestrianized. The idea, of course, is to cut the through traffic, to get people to go to school on foot, children and parents.
This used to go all the way there, and you were able to go all the way there, and now they just completely cut it off, and it has become a pleasant space. It's the Copernican revolution. Before, the middle of the street used to be the most dangerous spot, and now the middle of the street has become the most pleasant spot where people want to be, with shade, with greenery, with life.
The school streets are so amazing because...
All right, and if you want to finish watching that video, I highly recommend it. I just wanted to give you a taste. So the link to it is in the chat. All right, and next we're going to look at Barcelona. Barcelona offers another powerful model where school streets connect to the city's superblock strategy. Superblocks reorganize groups of city blocks to limit through traffic, prioritize walking and cycling, and return street space to people. In this context, the goal isn't just safety at the school gate, but also reclaiming streets for play, learning, climate resilience, and everyday life citywide, and especially in dense neighborhoods. So with that bigger picture in mind, let's come back to the US and we can look at how communities here are already adapting school streets to very different local contexts. While Paris and Barcelona often get the spotlight, school streets are very much a US story too, and a growing one. Programs are emerging in cities, suburbs, and small communities across the country, each shaped by local needs and constraints. I'm going to move fairly quickly through a few examples from US cities, and the goal here isn't to cover every detail, but to highlight patterns and lessons that show up across very different contexts. You can start to imagine what school streets might look in your own community. New York City operates the largest school streets program in the US through its Open Streets initiative, and it's often the first example people think of. So just to share a few scenes from this amazing program, I'm going to let this video play on mute while I speak. What's important to understand about New York is that school streets are not just a one-off safety project. They're part of a much larger public space ecosystem. Schools apply annually. The program is embedded in city policy, and nonprofit partners like Street Lab play a huge role in activating the space with art, play, and learning. There's also a deep historical context here. New York has been running play streets for over 100 years, so the idea that a street can temporarily belong to kids and families isn't new. School streets are a modern extension of that tradition. And one detail that really matters, in many New York City neighborhoods, schools simply don't have access to playgrounds or outdoor space. So because of that, school streets are often used not just for arrival and dismissal, but as outdoor classrooms and recess space during the school day. So in New York City, school streets aren't just about traffic safety, they're filling a real gap in access to space, play, learning, and daily movement. And Portland is an example that is helpful for a different reason. So in 2024, the city of Portland launched a school streets pilot in partnership with Portland Public Schools, with a clear intention to test, evaluate, and learn. This was a formal pilot and not an informal experiment. So the evaluation found calmer school front environments, more families walking and biking, and strong support from principals and caregivers. But what makes Portland especially useful is that the evaluation didn't just highlight successes, it also surfaced challenges. Things like signage clarity, operational consistency, and equity considerations around traffic diversion came up clearly in the findings. So that makes Portland a really valuable planning reference, especially for communities that want to move thoughtfully, anticipate concerns, and design a program that's both effective and equitable from the start. Seattle offers a strong example of what it looks like to build school streets into a broader safety framework. Their school streets are integrated into both Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School strategies, which helps normalize them as a part of everyday safety infrastructure rather than a special project. As of 2025, Seattle has 19 school streets, including 2 permanent 24/7 installations. Those permanent sites include student-designed artwork and small infrastructure changes that reinforce pedestrian priority. What Seattle really shows is a clear pathway: pilot, refine, repeat, and then where there's strong support, make it permanent. That kind of progression can be especially helpful for cities that want to start small but keep long-term options open. Philadelphia's first school street at Batch Martin Elementary is a great example of what a single, well-supported pilot can do. This is a dense residential row house neighborhood where traffic congestion during arrival and dismissal was a daily challenge. The school street transformed that block into a calmer pedestrian-first space during those peak times. One of the most striking things about this pilot was how quickly students used the space, walking, playing, and socializing almost immediately. Feedback from caregivers and staff was overwhelmingly positive, and media coverage helped build broader awareness. Even though this started as just one site, it sparked interest in exploring what a more coordinated citywide school streets framework could look like. There is so much that we can share about the benefits of these programs, but there's nothing quite as powerful as seeing them in action within your own community. We often see that launching just one site can quickly snowball into a broader interest and enthusiasm. Sacramento and Los Angeles show another important pathway, introducing school street concepts through demonstrations and safe routes to school events rather than formal policy programs. In both places, many of these efforts rely on quick build materials like cones and barricades, short-term closures, and volunteer or staff-managed access points. These demonstrations are often paired with walking school buses, revised drop-off locations, and broader school circulation planning. In Los Angeles especially, a key strength has been deep, culturally responsive community engagement, working with parents, students, community leaders, and local organizations to design and activate these spaces together. Activating school streets during Safe Routes to School event days means that the whole community is aware of the event, participating in the fun, and witnessing the positive impacts of active transportation firsthand. These examples are powerful because they show you that you don't need a fully institutionalized program to start testing school street ideas. You can begin with events, demonstrations, and relationship building and grow from there. And I just want to make sure that you're aware that there are a number of excellent resources, toolkits, and guides from groups like 880 Cities, Open Plans, and Playout, which are all available for free download online. But now we get to hear directly from two communities that are already doing this work and implementing school streets of their own. So we will begin with Megan Ramey, a Safe Routes to School manager in Hood River County, Oregon, who will share about her experience with neighborhood and abutter engagement. And afterwards, we will hear from Thad Dingman, principal of Dahlin Elementary in Arlington, Massachusetts, who will tell us about how his school approached communications with family and caregivers. Assistant Principal Samantha Karustis will also tag in to provide her insight. So Megan, I'll go ahead and pass this off to you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Megan, want to try again?
Yes, I know. It was see if I just unplug my
Megan, you're coming in really faintly.
Okay, let me try and unplug my headphones and see. Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes,
I'm
that's
just
great.
gonna
That's great.
I'll just not use my headphones.
Okay.
All right, hi, Megan Ramey from Hood River County School District, and I want to first set the tone that I am from Massachusetts as one of my four homes. I lived there 2001 to 2008, what I call the bicycle advocacy golden renaissance. And I want a hat tip to my dear friend Galen Mook, who runs Mass Bike, as well as my brothers and sisters in arms at Livable Streets and Boston Cyclists Union. That's where I learned how to become an advocate. And so I have a lot of love for Massachusetts. So next slide. So I was recognized last year as the Bike League's Educator of the Year. And I think a lot of that has to do with me being a Safe Routes to School champion. So thank you to all my colleagues that are on this webinar, because I think we all inspire each other to do better work. Next slide. So my two secrets of success are cheap, quick builds or demonstrations, and getting kids physically in the street and school streets are a fantastic mechanism or installation for both of those. Next slide. So the cost of this school street was in total $400, and you'll see like from the next slides that we had many different iterations, and this was done through an ODOT education grant that pays for essentially my work as a coordinator manager, and it was done through a series of pilots. Next slide. So where are we? Hood River is only, the city of Hood River is only 8,000 people. Our county is about 25,000 people, but we are 60 miles directly east of Portland in the Columbia Gorge. And you'll see by all those volcanoes around us that we are on the Cascades mountain range. And then on the right, you have our little city. On the north side, you see the Columbia River, and we are about a mile in diameter, super small. And the school that I'm going to be talking about is right here on the bottom, that red dot. So why a school street? Just like all the reasons Julia talked about. So when I first, I guess what brought me into this role was I started a bike train in 2020, and the principal at the time was the one who asked me to do it, and he was scared of parents driving their kids to school because of COVID fear. So he asked me to do a bike train, and that was essentially the grassroots movement that then got the funding to pay for me full time. So that same principal, I vividly remember him, like when I would either bring my daughter to school or lead the bike train to school, he would be standing out on this like area where there's a pink line on this map to the right, and be actively talking to parents about not parking or not driving on the street. And I remember thinking in the back of my mind, oh, this is like perfect for a school street. And yeah, so it's giving families a very safe place to walk and bike, but and then there's like the emissions, the noise pollution, the anxiety reduction, all those things. I think one of the most compelling reasons for a school street is to create a place for community to gather. Next slide. So we did 4 single-day pilots, I think over the course of about 2 or 3 years. And just like Julia mentioned, it was International Walk and Roll to School Day. That was our first single-day pilot. The next one was Earth Day. The local ice cream shop donated a ton of ice cream on that Earth Day school street, and there was just a line of like 40 to 50 students that had biked to school that day that were excited to get ice cream. And every single one of these pilots, I had to engage the principal. We're now on our 4th principal at that school. And the first principal was pretty easy. He's the one that would be standing out there. The second principal, I showed him Clarence Eckerson's street film on School Street, and he was like, can we do that around the school, like the whole school? And I was like, let's just start on these. On these 2, I don't want to like make some enemies in doing this. And then the neighbors, of course, we had to provide notices every single time we did a pilot. And then I recruited what I call my barricade dads, who stood out there just to like talk to people about why we were doing what we were doing. Next slide. This was a #1 recommendation in our 2022 Safe Routes to School plan. So it was really easy to point back to that and be like, this is something we said we wanted to do. Let's do it. Next slide. And the series of pilots could not have been done without this 5th grade teacher, Mr. Ryan Campbell, who I personally Venmo'd because there was no mechanism to pay him. And he would move the barriers twice a day, once before arrival and once after dismissal. Next slide. And for our essentially month-long, well, we had then a month-long pilot, then we had a whole year pilot. I got reports from parents that said there's cars still driving down the school street, and I would go out there and do some engagement. And this one dad on the right side, it was one of my favorite. I mean, both these stories are just very they pull at your heart. The mom on the left was just so happy to be able to walk her daughter to school the 5 blocks versus, putting her in a van driving her down 5 blocks, unloading her. It was just not the most, I guess, meaningful way to start and end their day. And now they get to listen to the birds, she said. But the dad on the right told me I'm doing God's work. And I've never had a compliment like that before. Next slide. So this is after the 1 month pilot that we did. You see that vast majority of it was residents and parents and staff that were surveyed, and it was a combination of electronic, and then there was a in-person interview, and the vast majority said they wanted to see it continue in the future. Next slide. One of my favorite response, like that people got to choose why a school street, and they said it made the street more peaceful. Next slide. And there was some pushback, and weirdly enough, it was from staff who have a parking lot in that zone. Even though they can still drive in and out and get to their parking lot, they complained that then they now have to drive safely. And so there was like an entire paragraph written by one staff who I just showed completely in an unedited form to the principal. And the principal said, yes, there's always one of these, and I know exactly who this is. And so I think it's important to just present survey results as they are essentially submitted to you. And it's just a very honest way to go about collecting feedback, but then also mitigating it. And since this is now permanent, you can go to the next slide. We don't have any issues. So this is one of my favorite responses from a local resident who used to be blocked into her driveway, like with parents who were dropping off their kids, and not like at least 2 or 3 residents said this. Their driveways used to be actively blocked by vehicles. And now her daughter, who was 18, when I was taking up the barricades after the 1 month pilot, she was like, can you just leave those here? Because the street is so much more peaceful now. But she was actually a vocal opponent of it at first. So the whole residents become your biggest advocates. Next slide. So to highlight Seattle, this was the design inspiration for a permanent installation. And I call it more of a passive school street that relies on essentially the well-intention of the parents. Next slide. And this is what it looks like permanent. So we took that Seattle slow street or stay healthy street, and that's what essentially we modeled it on. The Public Works Department was just a little concerned about snow removal. And so this was the design that we settled on. And it does require active engagement in the beginning, because not that parents have any ignorance or bad intention, they just don't know. And so I had to actively talk to people and say, this is now like a no-go zone for driving. And everybody was very understandable and thankful. Next slide. So the public perception changed drastically from the beginning. Like a neighbor that I would notice, she was like, what are we trying to do, be a bike town? And I was like, yeah, kind of. But now she actively emails me when she sees parents driving down it. And it's like you turn these almost like opponents into champions, and it just takes a couple demonstrations or pilots. Next slide. Some of the key takeaways is, yes, pilots, I can't highlight enough. It's a very, just do it now. It's a cheap way to get something in the ground and trial it, and the neighbors will become your allies. Parents love it because it is more, they just feel like a more of a sense of authority to make the street safer with their kids. And then you'll be surprised by the users. You never know who's going to walk down the street. So next slide. And in-person engagement is so important. There is no amount of signage or emails or social media campaigns that will make up for you standing physically in the street, greeting people, talking to people, and being able to actively dispel myths or talk about why you're doing it. And then people will definitely get it. And stories are so much more impactful than data. We were doing counts. They did not even come close to being impactful for leadership as stories. And so my recommendation to get started is to, yes, get the principal on board. The street film was very effective for me. Drafting a current or desired circulation map. And if you don't know what that is, it's really easy to Google school circulation map. Ask city for help with the process and materials. Of course, they have to be on board because it's their right of way. Number 4 is pick a meaningful date for your pilot. So for us, it was International Walk and Roll to School Day, engaging neighbors, leaving flyers. And number 6, recruiting volunteers for barricades and intercept surveys because you can't be everywhere at once, and collect stories. Next slide. And that, yeah, this is a video. I don't know if it will work, but it shows what it looked like on the school street.
I don't know if this one will work, so we'll just leave it in the PowerPoint for now.
Okay. And yeah, this is how you can get in touch with me. This is the website for our program, Walk and Roll, hoodrivercounty.com. I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram, and there's one picture that I was hoping would make it into the presentation of like the unknown users. One of the stories was I was standing there and I see a mom walking towards me with a cat in her arms and her daughter next to her. And they said the school street has been so amazing because the cat really does walk the kid to school every day and then will stay at the school until the administration kicks the cat out. But I just think it's like such an amazing sign that a school street does work. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Megan, for sharing your amazing work with us. Wonderful. And now we will hear from Thad and Samantha from Dahlin School in Arlington, Massachusetts.
Hi, everybody. I'm Thad.
I'm Sam.
Yeah, so we are a little bit about Dahlin. We're a neighborhood school right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Arlington is about a 6-mile wide town with about 60,000 residents. So pretty busy suburb. Again, we're one of 7 schools, and we're proudly a walk to school. We're built to be a walk to school community. All of our 7 elementary schools are within a mile of all the families that attend. So the dream is for our community, especially at the elementary level, to be walking together to our school every day. So a little bit about some of what Sam and I noticed, and this was about how many years ago now?
10.
Yeah, probably about a decade it started. Families weren't walking to school. In fact, the majority of our families were still commuting via automobile. So we were seeing less engagement from families on a daily basis. We were seeing a lot of vehicle congestion around our school and around our neighborhoods. Parking was a big problem for us. We have one parking lot for our staff, so our staff kind of relies on the neighboring blocks to park, and those weren't available, or we had basically people parking illegally around our schools every day. people disregarding crosswalks. Our main street that our school is located on is also a popular cross street for one of the um, ma major transportation routes into Boston. So we'd have people quite frequently speeding down in front of our school at concerning speeds. Um, and we were hearing a lot from our community. So our community, as much as we were promoting this desire to have families walk to school, they weren't, because they didn't feel like it was safe for them or safe for their child um, to walk to school on a daily basis, just based on the things that they were seeing.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add is with the congestion, there were a couple of instances where cars were pulling out and kids were stepping out of a car, and there were some near misses. So safety became really the priority. And so we engaged with Safe Routes to School, and because we had also a parent who worked with our advisory council, he worked with us to bring some more awareness around what was happening in our schools. And we really concentrated obviously on arrival and dismissal. So Judy Crocker, who was the Safe Routes to School representative, worked very closely with us, talked with us about what we were hoping to do, what we wanted it to look like around the school and the campus, and focused on the traffic flow on Florence Avenue, which is kind of the main thoroughfare that Thad was talking about. And she looked at the patterns of cars and the different side streets that we had and came up with some recommendations that would restrict the area right in front of the school. So that would be blocked off just for walking and for buses that were picking kids up. And then there would be a dedicated area that you can see on the slide, the area 5, that would solely be for drop off and then pick up in the afternoon.
Yeah, so we were lucky that in the past we'd had a relationship with Safe Routes to School, and they tried some different projects, but that had kind of dissipated over time, and it seemed that a lot of the ideas that had been generated previously became really person dependent. So as families or available volunteers, their child aged out, those programs would kind of go away. So when we started working again with Safe Routes, we looked for something more permanent. We figured we actually need a traffic pattern change, and one that was going to involve us learning a lot about bureaucracy at a town level. So it started, like Sam said, with Judy and some observations, and pretty clearly we came up with this plan to change the traffic patterns at certain times during the day to allow for families to walk to school without any traffic going in front of the school.
Next slide.
Next slide. Yeah, so not only working with different committees at the town level, we started to communicate to the residents in our neighborhood. We are surrounded on all sides by neighbors. So actually, I should say we have Florence Field next to us, but in front of our school and to the sides of our school are all residents who are pretty tightly packed, who we needed their support. So that involved us. We did virtual meetings. We dropped letters off door to door. We had relationships with some of the families right across the street, so just knocking on their door and talking with them. And I wouldn't say that we had 100% support, probably not even close to that, but we were able to get at least the abutting neighbors to agree to give us their permission to launch a pilot. So in August 2021, after moving through, different aspects of town governance, we did our first pilot project. So that part started with also the select board, which is sort of one of the main the most kind of important group in our town in terms of approving a permanent traffic change to one of the streets. They gave us their permission, and after we piloted, we got the opportunity to go back to the select board with the results, which also involved going back to the neighbors and getting their input and their buy-in. After all that, the select board approved a permanent change to the traffic patterns in front of our school. Next slide. Along that way, we got signage. We were watching the previous presentation and thinking about budgets. We never really had a budget to support our project. It really involved working with the stuff that we had. So we were using our own cones and items that had been left over from construction projects in the area. We were using any kind of visuals because there was no money that was being granted from the town. They're pretty clear about that from the start. After our pilot moved through, we did receive some signage that was more bigger in size, that was more durable, more year-round. And so, now when you come by our school, and so even though we kind of talked quickly through it, the full process of moving through and getting approval for our project took about 2 years to accomplish in a lot of meetings, and a lot of pilots and feedback cycles, all well worth it. And at the end, our town did come back through and donated some new items for us to use for signage that we are still using today.
It's time for a refresh, though.
It's time for a refresh. We were just talking about that.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, if you want to do next slide. So when we think about where we were to where we are now, it's actually pretty amazing. We doubled our amount of students that walk to school easily. And even though you may have just seen it in the news, we got pounded with about 2 feet of snow, we still have our sidewalks clear, and we still have volunteers and students that make drop off and arrival happen every day. So it's now just a part of the fabric of coming to school at Dowling Elementary. Even on days where something may happen and we don't get out there quite soon enough to put our signs out, you will see cars instinctually just turn and take the side streets and avoid driving right in front of our school. So it's become now a habit and part of the culture of the community to support what we're doing on a daily basis. This slide, you see our morning drop-off team. We have kids, student leaders who are out every day, welcoming families, opening doors, saying hello to the kids who are coming into school. We have school staff and who help with this in the mornings, and we have volunteers still in our community who come out, but it's not actually dependent on volunteers anymore. We've built it into the responsibilities of our staff. So it's really our goal was to make sure that this was not a person-dependent program anymore, and it has become completely program dependent. The community supports us. Our staffing, our staff supports us. Local Arlington Police Department come from time to time and hang out and observe. They're supporting us as well. And ultimately, it's about getting families to walk to school. And it is so noticeable and incredible the amount of not just kids, but families who are there every day and every morning to hand over their children. It's been great. It's a great vibe.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is we've gotten great feedback from our families who are bringing their kids to school every day, but also the neighbors. They have appreciated the kind of continuity of the traffic structure, and so it's been a great project for us.
Yeah, our two things we were saying that we thought if we were to pass anything on from the context that we accomplished this project in, is persistence. It took us about 2 years to get all the pieces in place. And communication. There was a lot of communication with our families, with the community who are around our neighborhood, with different aspects of town government. But, in the end, we look back, it's just now part of how we come to school today.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam and Thad. We appreciate it. And thank you to Megan and Julia for sharing their time and insight and leadership about school streets. We appreciate you all being here. This year, the Safe Routes to School team actually created a guide on school streets. We encourage you to take a look at it, and you might notice that the Dallin School is featured in it. So our hope is that this guide and webinar inspires you all to test out the idea of a school street in your community. And Leon's actually going to paste the link to the guide in the chat. So thank you for doing that. Before we get into the Q&A portion of this webinar, I want to let you know about a few upcoming Safe Routes to School events. So we have a packed second half of the school year. If you would like to get more involved in the program, please reach out to us and we can connect you with your outreach coordinator. Leon will also provide the link to our OC page in the chat as well. Please make sure you follow and like us on social media for the most up-to-date news and resources. We also have a Massachusetts-specific listserv you can join, and you can subscribe to our e-blasts and newsletters if you aren't on them already. Again, if you didn't get a chance to fill out the annual partner survey at the beginning of the webinar, Leon, can you please paste the link again in the chat for everybody? We really appreciate receiving feedback about the Safe Routes to School program so we can continue to improve it. But without further ado, thank you everyone for joining us today. The recording of this webinar will be available on our website shortly. But again, last time, Leon, can you please paste the PDF of the slides in the chat for everyone? But now I'd like to open things up for Q&A. Please place questions in the chat or raise your hand, come off mute to ask a question. If you do think your question requires a more in-depth discussion, please feel free to ask those questions via email. And I'll invite our speakers to, come on camera and help field some of these questions. So Colleen, are there any hands raised or questions in the chat?
I am not seeing any questions in the chat quite yet. Oh, one just popped in from Mel, asking if you can say more about the equity concerns.
Is that one directed to Megan?
That were raised in Mount Hood. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like we might have lost Megan, but we can follow up with her over email to connect with any questions people have.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
Not seeing any questions in the chat. Oh, one just popped in. A question from Susan, but what do you do in settings with school buses that need to enter the school?
I can speak to that a bit. So a lot of the time, school buses will be allowed either on a different portion, a different street, or a different part of like the school parking lot. But accommodations are made for school transportation. And one issue that is really important to consider also are any students with mobility issues or disabilities. So it's really important to make sure that those students are dropped off right front and center at the school. So you can kind of work with the school community to figure out a solution. It's just going to depend on the layout of the area around the school and the school parking lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can probably speak to that too. I mean, bus arrival was a big part of our project. So I'm looking at them right now, actually out my window. So they know that they're the only vehicles that come through that area at certain times. So they pull in. We have a cutoff in front of our school. So they're parked. We're on a pretty fixed schedule of them. So there is some concessions, and that's worked out pretty well for us.
Thanks, Thad.
There was a question from Tyler, wondering if folks could speak to concerns that might come up from neighbors at the ends of new school streets that might be complaining about their areas becoming new drop-off zones. It sounds like Tyler has experienced some complaints. So if anyone can speak
foreshadowing
to that.
complaints.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only thing that makes me think of is the neighbors that abut our drop-off zone. And instead of having two-way traffic now, it's primarily one-way traffic. And so I think that there is some appeal with that. And before School Streets, the program was in place, people were dropping their kids off and then doing U-turns. And so we really, with the abutters that were concerned about it, we talked about the overall safety and really focusing on the more fluid traffic pattern and more expected traffic pattern. And I think now that we're 4 years in, they're used to it.
Yeah, it's all about getting the buy-in, just to get people to
Try it.
try it. Yeah, give you the trust to just try it, and notice the changes. And yeah, for us, it was pretty noticeable.
Thank you both.
And I might just add in also that one solution there is that you can ask parents to drop off a few blocks from the school. It can either be a casual thing where they drop off where it's convenient, or you could have it by grade level where they park a certain number of blocks away from the school, which really spreads out those issues so that it's not just one neighbor dealing with all of the school traffic.
And then Nelson asked a question in the chat about what other organizations can be involved in the project and how one might engage with them.
Well, I was going to say, just in general, like Safe Routes to School programming, we find is the most successful when you have the school, the community, and the municipality all working together. So if you can try and identify, different folks in those areas. So maybe is that the PTO? Is that the police? Is that the, transportation advisory committee in that town? And then, is there a bike ped committee? I think all of those are, places to start. Maybe there's a boys and girls club down the street, or I don't know, just like different ideas of just getting the conversation started, I think is helpful. But I don't know if Julia or Thad and Sam have any thoughts.
Yeah, we're just thinking about who we engage with. I mean, we started with our school council, which is a group of staff representatives, parent representatives, and a community rep. And from there, we went and engaged our PTO and our neighbors and our community. But along the way, we absolutely was the first important connection we made was to our TAC, our Transportation Advisory Committee in town. And they were great about doing, they'd come and observe traffic patterns, and they got really informed on the things that were concerning us. So they became really our biggest advocates in town. And they were the important first step to getting our case or our project, I guess, in front of the select board. So that was a important group. We had the APD.
Yeah, I was going to say resource officer.
Yeah, and our school resource officer, who was great. And that also brought programming into the school. So then we were able to communicate out that we're doing pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. So we started to do some curriculum aspects through those partnerships. And it just created a really compelling, serious commitment to what we wanted to do. So those were all great. So I learned a lot about our town governance and I knew nothing about, and I would definitely recommend that's your starting place, just to understand who your advocates are, town level.
Great. Thank you so much.
And I just wanted to add also other groups that I think are important to engage with are different community groups that might represent different populations within the school. So if there are any Latino groups, that would be a really good organization to connect with to make sure that your messaging is really going to resonate with all different members of the community. And also just make sure that all of the different perspectives and voices are factored in when you're starting to plan and make decisions. Sometimes just making sure that you're intentionally involving these communities can have a huge impact as far as their involvement and support. And also, I think it's great if you can make sure that you're promoting this in a broader way with different news media organizations, because school streets are they're different, they're exciting, and they're high impact. You might find that a news station might want to show off your work, which can not only show off the school street, but can highlight the program. It can highlight active transportation in general. So all of those different connections are really great.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. And I think too, I know there was a comment in the chat about, this is, more set up for neighborhood schools. I do think another alternative could be the idea of a park and walk or park, walk, and roll where cars, the family vehicles can drop off at a satellite location. Maybe there's a church parking lot down the street that you could partner with. And that way it just kind of broadens the congestion radius around the school. And then that way you're prioritizing the walkers, the bikers, and the buses, on school property, but that kind of can get things rolling, no pun intended, rather than going the school streets route. But with the interest of time, I do want to thank everyone again for being here and spending time with us on this chilly Wednesday. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Again, this will be recorded, and if you have any other questions outside of this, feel free to reach out and we will connect you with your outreach coordinator. Again, thank you all.